Jack makes an escape plan, but there's always a Claus. Here's your look at the Diamond Select Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas Oogie's Lair action figure set. Jack Skellington, the Pumpkin King of Halloween, had grown tired of his yearly routine when he discovered a doorway to another world called Christmas Town. Fascinated with the trappings of this new holiday, Jack tries to take over Christmas duties from Santa Claus, but he is clueless about joy and the merriment as the other scare-happy citizens of Halloween Town. Now with Christmas in danger of not coming at all, Jack must undo the damage he has wrought and rescue Santa Claus from the clutches of the evil Oogie Boogie. This set is based on a scene from Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas. Each action figure features multiple points of articulation and paint that will react to a black light. A slightly older set, the Oogie's Lair was. It was released as a PX Previews exclusive for San Diego in 2020. It was also limited to a release of 3,000 copies worldwide. So if you're interested in picking this setup for yourself from last year, you should be able to check it out online, probably places like eBay, for example. I'd like to thank the folks over at Diamond Select that kindly provided the sample of Oogie's Lair that we could have a look at in this review. I figured before, of course, we have a look at all the individual figures. Let's get some calculations in order, starting first with Oogie himself. After all, the set is named after him. I'm going to take it right to the very top of his head, or what's left of it. The figure stands 8.2 inches in height. That's pretty tall. Switching it to centimeters, the figure stands 20.8 centimeters tall. Switching it back to inches again. There we go. We're now go ahead and take to the very top of Jack Skellington's head. This is all made simpler by being able to use this tape measure as my available means to provide you guys, again, the 411 information. Jack Skellington, granted, yes, he is using the display stand, but he's pretty much touching the floor. The figure stands 9.3 inches in height. Switching that to centimeters, again, the figure is 23.6 centimeters tall. I'm not going to calculate 0, simply just because he's attached to a display stand anyways. But let's once again reset back to the beginning. And now have a look at Santa Claus. Santa Claus is about the same height as Oogie Boogie, but still, nonetheless, I'm going to take the tape measure right to what I feel is the top of his hat. The hat is removable, by the way. Santa Claus stands 7.8 inches in height. Switching that to centimeters once again, almost 20 centimeters is Saint Nick, 19.8 to be exact. One of the big sells of this set, if you're lucky enough to pick this one up last year, is it does have a blacklight diorama backdrop. I didn't use it at the beginning of this review because it would be hard to balance that on the turntable, and I'm not using it right now, but I will bring it in so you guys can get a better idea of what it looks like and how it changes the color scheme, because each one of these figures have a different unique paint scheme that is triggered by that black light. Why don't we start first with Jack Skellington himself. Now, currently I've got him on a display stand. One good thing is both Jack and Zero do come with their own corresponding display stands, and it does make things a lot easier for getting Jack to stand. As you certainly know by the makeup of this figure, he's awfully sleek and slender, very difficult to stand on his own, so thank goodness they include a display stand for him. We'll go ahead and just unplug it. What it is just basically you're taking the plug right here, getting the camera to focus in, and it plugs right into the back of his torso. Couldn't be any bit more easier than that. Just put the figure down for a second. Both Zero and Jack seem to share the same type of stand, with several different knuckle joints allowing this to be bent and manipulated. Now, I decided for myself, I don't think there's any clear-cut instructions telling me that one is more suitable for one than the other, but I just figured it made more sense to have the black stand with Jack Skellington, so that Zero sort of looks more like he's just levitating in the sky. But like I said, it's just a standard display stand. It does have a peg hole there. Although if you look at Jack, he doesn't have any pegs on the undersides of his feet. His feet are just, first of all, way too small in the first place. He just wouldn't be able to plug into place. Again, make use of that plug located on the back of his torso. Maybe what I will do is I'll move these figures over because I feel like the camera wants to zoom in to the back of them instead of looking at Jack. We'll just move Santa Claus out of the way as well. Here we have Jack Skellington with a big smile across his face from ear to ear, if he had ears, of course. I do like the head sculpt particularly. Sort of off-shaped circle, what we're used to seeing. But of course, if he is smiling, yes, it would make some sense that, yeah, that's going to be sticking out from the sides as well. it has a real sheen to the head. Whereas if you look at the body, for example, the body is a little bit more of a matte white, for example. I do think the head sculpt is really sharp, though. Very clean paint also applied on that panel lining for the mouth. Equally, though, the eyes as well as the nose nostrils, once again left of them, very nicely painted. I don't know if we have actually gotten this Jack before. I feel like we have, and simply the only thing that's changing in this particular set is the inclusion of that black light painting. You can definitely see with Jack, for example, like the coloring of his costume seems slightly off, a little bit more on the gray variety. Again, I feel like a lot of that has something to do, and maybe that's one of the reasonings also as well, that his head is a little more on the shinier side to work with that black light that we'll look at in a second. Still has the bat bow tie, as you can see, made of a softer plastic, so be careful of that. But he's a very limber chap, very long, slender legs. I did notice that getting this out of the packaging, the legs are a little on the loose side, but that usually tends to be the case when it comes to Jack Skellington figures. I mean, I love the design of Jack Skellington, but he's always a problematic character to translate to a figure because simply he's just long, skinny legs. That's making up the majority of his body. For the articulation on Jack Skellington, his head rotates back and forth, although it is awfully hard to kind of grab onto it because I feel like the slick nature of his head kind of is preventing a little bit of that. The arms move back and forth. Just be careful of the fact that they're slightly smaller pegs. Slightly smaller, he says. They're quite small. He does have hinges in the elbows, and basically all the joints work the same way. They're those swivel hinge joints where it's a hinge, but then depending on which way you're rotating it, for example, will dictate how you can turn it. But the arms do move back and forth, and he does have articulations on the little, tiny little Jack Skellington hands. Nice paint job on that. And of course, when it comes to his legs, he doesn't have, he has an articulation point on the torso, but again, you kind of have to be really careful kind of getting your fingers in there. He does have leg articulation that moves forward and back. You can also move it out. He has a bend at the knee, again, being careful of that. And he does have articulation in the feet, just little turns back and forth. So that's Jack Skellington. I'd be hard-pressed to say that this is a unique figure to this particular box set. And again, in fact, I think all the figures are ones that we had gotten before. Even Smiling Jack, I feel like we have gotten before. The only difference is, again, the black light inclusion, which I know I keep hinting at. We'll look at that in a second. Let's just plug Jack into his torso and his torso into the display stand, so at least the figure doesn't fall over. Like the look of that Jack. Yeah, a little spindly in his legs, but there's really no way around that. That's just the design of Jack Skellington. I suppose if we're going to be looking at Jack, it probably would make then some sense to have a look at his little trusty Ghost Dog Zero. We're going to go ahead and just take him off the display stand. Just the same style of stand as Jack's, just in a clear variety. If you wanted to, I suppose you could flip those back and forth. But here we have Zero. There is articulation in the head, so in case you're curious, yes, there is. I got a little bit of paint or something flaked on the back of the head sculpt here. You can kind of see it right there. But that's it. It's there, but I'm only going to be really seeing it from the front. He does have the hollow body, of course, underneath, and a singular peg that's going to go right underneath there. That, of course, will go along with the peg, of course, from the display stand, and that just plugs into place like that. If you wanted to as well, I mean, these are all sectional. You could take these off, and you could shorten the length of these if you feel like the neck is way too long. Just trim them down a little bit. Like I said, you just take these off, and then you just use this peg here if you wanted to have Zero slightly lower on display. Let's go ahead and put Zero back on his display stand. Because if not, it would be probably, we just end up laying him on the turntable or on the display base for the time being. There we go. Put him right there. Maybe let's have a look at Oogie Boogie next. I feel so bad leaving Santa Claus for the last of this review. But go ahead and pick up the figure. It's essentially the exact same Oogie Boogie that we got before, although the last Oogie Boogie that we looked at on this channel, I think I'm just looking for reasons now to say Oogie Boogie. He was more of a burlap brown color. Clearly, this Oogie is much more brighter, a Slimer green color, if you will. The green does give a great opportunity, if anything, to really have these seams of those stitches pop done in black. Of course, also, you can see his eyes there, nicely done in dark recessed areas of black, and of course his mouth is also black as well. Despite the color change, I will say it still shows out the really nice texturing that they put to the surface of the plastic. Really like the way that this one turned out. It's heavy. I mean, if you ever had somebody breaking into your house and you need to pick up something to throw across the room and knock them out, Oogie Boogie would probably be the first thing I would pick up. Like, this is all solid plastic, all of it. Possibly maybe the torso not being the case, but definitely down below. That's a paperweight of a figure right there. One feature that is neat about Oogie Boogie, like at the end of the movie, you can go ahead and take the faceplate. I'd like to think that that's not a spoiler, but I'm going to go ahead and remove the faceplate. It's kind of hard to get in there, get your finger behind there and pop that out. And underneath, you basically have all the worms and insects that make up its body. That's a fun touch. I don't know if I remember having the other Oogie Boogie doing this. Is this unique to the figure? I'd have to look into that. I do like the coloring that they incorporated into the bugs. It's really hard to kind of decipher one from the other because there's just a combination of sculpted things all thrown together. You sort of can understand, like, those are all like little worms. They've colored some of them slightly different than the ones around them. But that's just a fun touch, the idea that they would include that. And basically all it is, it's friction. The sculpting is matching, kind of mirrored on the inside of his face. And when you put that against the insects, it basically holds everything in place. Articulation on Oogie Boogie, his head rotates back and forth. While you're doing this, just be careful that you don't remove his face. That would be disappointing. The arms move back and forth. They're on very large hinges, and despite for his size and girth, I'm actually able to move out the arms pretty good on this guy. Arms rotate, like I said, all the way around on both cases. You can move the upper torso, it's on a ball joint, and there is no articulation on the rest of his body, this paperweight body that he has. So that's Oogie Boogie. And last, and certainly not least, so sorry St. Nick for leaving you last, we also have ourselves Santa Claus. Now again, I've had a look at these figures in the past, Santa Claus being a notable exception. Well, not a notable exception, he was one of the ones we looked at before. His body is basically comprised of a hollow shell. Well, the outer area at least is a hollow shell. You can still see his body underneath there. Whoops, not dropping his hat in the process. Probably would have made some sense, I suppose, to remove the hat first. But it's basically just a hollow outer shell. And then, of course, he's got his pants underneath there. Are those hollies? Nice looking pants, Santa. I feel like the beard is a different color. The other Santa Claus would have had a more whiter beard from what I remember. And again, may have a lot of this have factored into the idea that they're using a black light for the display stand, which I know I keep teasing at. We will have a look at that in a second. Santa Claus had dropped it, so let's retrieve that. He does come include with his hat. The hat just sits on top of his head. It's not to the point where if you tilt the figure upside down, it's not going to stay on his head. In fact, as you saw, it fell off his head. I had to go retrieve it. There is a unique way of putting his hat as well. You'll sort of see on the inside there, it's sculpted specifically for this little tuft of hair that he's got on top of his head. So just kind of line it up, fit it in place, and I suppose that's more than enough to kind of keep the hat in place until, of course, you accidentally tilt it upside down. I like the head sculpt on Santa Claus. I was happy with this figure the first time around, and even though like the coloring on this guy seems a little bit darker, especially with his beard, I think it's still a great looking Santa Claus to have on display. For his articulation, he doesn't have anything in the head. I mean, anything of rotating is only just rotating his hat. He does have the arms that rotate all the way around, however. It hinges out, and then he does have articulation also in the arms, in the hands, I should say. And that's pretty much Santa Claus. I don't know why he always reminds me. My grandmother was always big about doing this. You know, those kind of coverings they put over top of toilet paper rolls or kettles. Am I dating myself by saying this? Kind of those, you know, crocheted things. It kind of reminds me of that. Like, this is something I would expect Santa Claus to be covering over a roll of toilet paper. Is that strange for me to say that? Yeah, probably a little weird to be saying that. Nonetheless, though, moving to the black light that we were talking about at the beginning and somewhat throughout the course of this review, this particular set, Oogie's Lair, comes included with, literally, Oogie's Lair. Specifically, the Rolodex wheel at the very end finale battle between Jack Skellington and Oogie Boogie. The neat thing about this is that this can slide outside of the box, which I've already taken the liberty of doing. It's got the detail work on the inside, giving you all, of course, the look, the makings of how Oogie's Lair looks like in the film. Kind of moving the figures kind of off to the side for the time being. Kind of a little harder because it's taking up so much space. Just moving everything over here. Picking up the display base. I want to show you what the inside looks like here. Again, this is all just done in straight cardboard, but you can see like Diamond put a lot of effort into mimicking what the lair looks like, especially at the end of the movie. Now, there are black lights. You see several of them already. So, 2 on the side, 2 on this side, 2 in the middle. And all of these work by a battery compartment located just around to the back. On the back here, this stores 3 AA batteries. There's a try, an off, and an on mode, and then there's the button there. So if you set it to try, all you have to do is press the button, there's the off, and then there's the full on treatment. To switch it to on, I'll show you exactly what ends up happening. At the very top, you have the familiar purple coloring of the black light. I always found that funny that they called it black light, and yet a lot of times it's always usually a purple light. But the idea, though, is putting this back in place and then going ahead and taking the figures. Why don't we first start with 0? I'm going to try to do these one at a time so you guys can see what it looks like. Taking the figure and moving 0 up, for example, to the black light. It's really hard to kind of do that in frame, but you can kind of see with 0, for example, he has almost a slight purplish tint. Now, really, you could say 0 is a white figure anyways. When you're just shining light on top of it, yeah, it's probably going to come across a little bit more on a purple side. But it does. At least it illuminates him a little bit. Move him to the side. Let's go ahead and take Jack Skellington off his display stand. Reaching off, pulling him off his stand. And again, here we have Jack Skellington, holding him up to the light. He kind of almost comes across slightly a little bit more like a bluish green. It doesn't really necessarily, well, it does radiate a little bit of his costume. His costume comes across a little more on a slight pinkish side. But it certainly does look great. And don't worry, I'm going to do a better job of this when we all set these figures up. But for the time being, it was just simply just to show you what the figures look like. Let's go ahead and take Oogie Boogie, which definitely will be illuminating a lot more. I guess also really what I could do is just put the figures underneath the black light to kind of give you guys an idea. What I will also really do too is I'll cut the lights in the studio. Studio, he says. And you'll then be able to see what these guys look like with the lights all turned off, except for, of course, the black light. Let's go ahead and bring in Santa Claus. Put him right there. Let's bring back in 0. I was going to really just hold these guys up to the light, but it serves best to have them basically just underneath the lights and then the light shining down on them. And then all we really need to then do is grab ourselves the stand for Jack Skellington. Pop that into place. Put this on the back of his torso. And we'll also put him in there as well. You could probably understand why I would have not been able to do this at the beginning of this review. It would just be extremely difficult to put all of this on a turntable. But with that being said, let's go ahead and cut the lights and see what the figures look like with the black light shining down on them. Truly an interesting looking scene when you've got all of them inside the diorama base and the light shining down on them. All of them seem to color things slightly different. 0, really, now that you can see it in the video, comes across slightly more pink. Jack Skellington has a slight bluish green color. Oogie Boogie truly is the one that is illuminated the most by having that black light shining down on him. And even like Santa Claus, if you look at the fur on his sleeves, the fur around his hat, and even the beard itself, all have an illumination to it. It really is something that's spectacular when you put it on display. Even if you already have these figures already part of your collection, the idea of getting these as the exclusives with the slight tweaking of black light painting that they applied to the plastic really results in these looking quite good on display in the daylight. Or if you do what I've just done here, have the lights all turned off and only have the black lights of the display box shining down on them. Even though this is final looks of Oogie's Lair, there was no way I would be able to get all of this on the turntable, and I didn't really want to just have the figures all sort of crouched in closed quarters, spinning around on that turntable, when really the way to best serve and display these are the way that we have them displayed currently in Oogie's Lair. A nice touch on Diamond's part to include something extra outside just having the figures painted differently. By adding the black light paint to all of these figures means that they also illuminate. Even though technically I've got the black light shining right now, you don't truly benefit from it until you've got all the lights cut out in your room where you've got these on display. Now I know all the figures have been ones that have been released before. The only thing I'm not quite certain about is if that particular portrait on Jack Skellington was released in a previous release from Diamond Select or if it's unique to this set. I'm feeling like it's probably released before, but I can't quite place where I've seen that head sculpt. I know we have gotten ourselves countless Jack Skellingtons over the years, but this one is different in the sense that all of these are painted slightly different with a brand new specific paint designated to react with the black light. And even though it doesn't look as impressive now, when you saw it at the end of this video, I guess just before final looks and we had all the lights cut out, boy, did those figures ever shine. I like the fact that this is a removable piece from the box. I didn't even have to really destroy anything in the process. Sometimes when you do try to take things out of boxes, like the backdrop, you end up destroying it. And luckily I didn't have to do that. These were easy to remove. Easy to remove batteries as well. The battery compartment, as you saw in this review, is simple. You just unscrew the back plating, replace the 3 AA batteries, and I'm glad they use AA batteries instead of button cell batteries. So it means that if you ever have issues with the lights cutting out on this, changing the batteries of 3 AA's is a lot easier than changing out button cell batteries. And again, the end result is a fantastic looking display that you can put in your room. Again, a big thank you to the folks over at Diamond Select that provided the sample of the Oogies Lair. This was released as a previous exclusive last year in 2020. Which means, if you guys are looking to pick this one up for yourself, it's limited to 3,000 copies if I'm not certain. And picking this one up, your best bets now are places like eBay. Hopefully you're not going to be paying too much for these. But definitely a very exciting set to get. Definitely a set that warrants having the backdrop out on display and the figures standing in the forefront. What do you guys think of Oogie's Lair? Let me know down below in the comments section. If you guys are also new to this channel and liking all the content you're seeing, digging the fact that we're also doing more Nightmare Before Christmas figures, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Be sure to turn on the bell notification. And be sure, to come back to this channel on a regular basis, because there's always new videos popping up. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.